iHeartRadio presents Podversations, a weekly discussion with the biggest names and influencers in podcasting.
Hey everybody, and thank you so much for joining us again for another installment of the iHeartPodcast Network Speaker Series. This is probably my favorite moment of the week, honestly, where we get to stop down and spend a half an hour with an incredible creator, partner, publisher, innovator, with something of a focus on podcasting, but these conversations usually go well beyond that as we talk to somebody we really admire and are very grateful to partner with, honestly. This week is no exception. I, along with my partner in crime, Giselle Bances, who is the executive producer and the lead of a new project and company we've launched in partnership with Enrique Santos, a company called My Cultura. It's a Latinx podcast network. We'll get into that in a little bit. We have the distinct honor and are just going to have a blast talking to Wilmer Valderrama. First of all, Wilmer, thank you so much for hanging out with us for a half hour today. I really appreciate it, man.
No, thank you for having me. So fun to continue to iron out, the ability to continue to sharpen our tools as we kind of move forward, and how we do this when we do it together,
So listen, you are known for a lot of things. You're an actor, you're a producer, you're an activist. You've been in everything from that 70s show to NCIS and lots of stuff in between. But let's take a step back for a second. It's been a really crazy year and a half for all of us. It's this thing called quarantine or whatever. How has that been for you? What have you been filling your time with? I hear there's a new kid in the mix. What's it been like?
I mean, it's been a learning curve, if we're gonna use pandemic terms, it's been an exciting ride. I think that, for us, and I can speak for us men, most of us, we have a purpose, right? We have a specific vision of what it kind of feels like and looks like to be a man, but, you don't really understand the magnitude and the joy of the responsibility until that new member of the family comes in, and it just wakes up the most incredible primal, instincts that you would never know. You would never know that we're in there, right? I mean, sometimes people can tell you, read this book and here's what it's like. And, in sidebar for all those new dads out there, all your boys are always going to give you the worst case scenario stories, and they're going to give you the horror stories about it, but the truth is every story is different. And I can reassure you of that. I think it's all about perspective and how you navigate always the half full, instead of the empty. So that really, really helped me through the process. But I will say, I appreciate you asking. It's about partnership, right? I mean, and my lady and I, we're very much on the same page, and mentally where we need to be. And it's a joy. It's beautiful. It's a pleasure to change your baby's diaper.
It's a pleasure to change your baby's diaper is not true. But I'll ask you this follow-up anyway. I have 4 kids, so I'm with you at every step of the way here. But I cannot imagine having a new kid during quarantine, during the year and a half we've been living through. Right. First of all, just logistically, I imagine it's really hard. But like emotionally, you're looking at a world that is going through a really tough time, a lot of pessimism, a lot of challenges. But you have this new incredible life literally in your hands that fills a human with optimism. Did you feel, right? How did you balance that? It's
a fantastic, I mean, I'm super happy you asked that, because that's been the ongoing conversation for a lot of new parents and a lot of new families. Even for existing families, you have to pivot what it was like before, then what it was like during. And then as you look at some kind of hopeful new horizon where you're kind of close to where you need to be in back of normality of it all, there's a new set of rules. There's a new loss of physics, loss of possibilities, at the same time. And, fighting for positivity and optimism became also the thing that we all kind of related in common. I think that, to your point, I think I learned a lot about what was really important and what noise you allowed in your life And I'm pretty sure everyone can relate to this part. I think that, you realize what friends are really essential and what friends aren't, and I don't mean anything in the sense of like influence or positivity or what they bring to the table. You just mean like, who are those individuals in your life who, who kind of really made an effort to make, to stay in touch, made an effort to kind of be around you. And that stuff is like, that was also the other learning experience. But I think all in all, if you think about the positive side of it, besides the obvious, which we'll eventually get into, I think there was an upside on that. I feel like we have an appreciation for the essential, the essential, vital meaning of living life. And but it was challenging, right? Because I had parents who I have Latino parents who only go to the doctor when it hurts, and I've talked about that in my podcast as well. But they're kind of so programmed to go to the doctor when it hurts that was really important to kind of reprogram our family to really think about prevention and all of that. So, I mean, there's so much. It's such a loaded question, right? But I think when it comes to full circle about your kid, you hope that as they grow up into this, and this world where eventually in a near flashback, they can remember what this pandemic did to society and to our country and to the world, that they could really appreciate where they're at, and that they can carry the torch and make it better.
Hey, Wilmer, it's so nice to see you. Gracias por acompañarnos. It's always great to talk to you. And I'm really excited about the new show, which, I want to get into a little bit. But, speaking of learnings, we know you from acting, from producing. I've seen you in a couple of music videos as well. but, podcasting is new to you. It's a medium you haven't done before. So tell me, what has that experience sort of been like? Have you had the freedom to be more creative, and how does it compare to acting? That was really a unique, that was a really unique experience. I think that when you think about the medium, when you think about the world where you decide, okay, well, there's a new platform, there's a new way of communicating a narrative. It's unique for an actor, right? It's unique for somebody who's produced and direct and done other things. And it's a different science, and I would never come into this space and assume like, oh, I'm a podcast guy, I'm a host. I'm not, in any shape or form. I think that I have a lot of colleagues who do this really well. I have a lot of actor friends of mine who have their own podcasts who do really well. But I also am in the school of like, we don't need another celebrity with a podcast, and I certainly, look at this as like an opportunity to do it differently. And I think that as an actor, and as an artist, our job is to amplify the experiences that we have, but also it's about creating, a playing field, like instead of having a platform, us having a conversation on the ground level. And that's what fascinated me about this specific art form.
What about moving from a medium that's less visual? Is it hard to not lean on stuff that you're used to? The thing about podcasting is obviously it's a purely visual medium. Or a purely audio medium. It's driving a lot of visuals now. You're seeing a lot of podcasts turn into TV shows. Right. But is that hard for you sometimes to say, wait, I don't have the usual tools at my disposal?
I mean, yes and no, right? I mean, I think I kind of like the audio version of it, and I think it traditionally, nostalgically so. I feel like it's kind of going back to the to talk radio, what it used to be like when you used to just sit and listen to a talk radio program, and I like the nostalgia of that, and I like how universal that is. I think that there's something about not having the visuals or having video in your podcast that's actually a little bit more impactful. You are kind of forced to really take in word per word. And I feel like you really focus a little bit more on what's happening. I know, call me old school, I guess, but I really do think that when you're listening to a podcast, you really you really allow it to enter, and I've really been falling in love with
how inventive and how innovative, the podcast universe has been. I mean, iHeartRadio has done it incredibly well by creating these tiers of the universe of iHeart, where you could touch not only just multiple categories of communities, but multiple categories of conversations and genres. So there's a whole universe to discover that you can access anywhere in the world, as long as you have, a phone or a laptop or anything, any way that you can connect. So to me, there's another new frontier for narrative.
It's a pretty cool medium. I mean, you have this weird moment where podcasting, this new medium, is now being listened to by over 100 million Americans a month. And just doesn't happen that often, that a whole new medium comes along and reaches mass audiences like that. So, but let's talk about your podcast. So we were excited to partner with you around this idea called Essential Voices. It premieres July 27. I think you will do this much more justice than me, but I mean, the spirit of this was to highlight the voices of essential workers. Where did this come from? Why use your podcast in this way? What background do you bring to this? Maybe just talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, to be even more vulnerable or more honest about it, I think that I guess to just be really upfront, there was an instinct that made me really angry, made me really frustrated. During the pandemic, I went to a grocery store. And I talked to my local grocery store worker and I say, hey, how you doing today? And they've been at work. They decided they had to be there, an hour, 2 hours before they open, and they had to stay an hour, 2 hours after they close, because they had to restock and they have to welcome the most vulnerable community as they were granted early access to the grocery stores before the regular hours. So I said, how you doing? And she said to me, I'm okay. And I said, well, my perception is, thankfully, you're one of the few that is working, that most of us, most of the world, I say, and I know the colleagues, that we're forced to go home, and she said she was okay because she's realized that so many odd, different character traits have woken up in their regular customers. They've grown kind of angry, they've grown aggressive, and at the simple statement of saying, like, we ran out of toilet paper. So if you remember, there was a frenzy for toilet paper because the zombie apocalypse was coming and people really needed to have the safety of their own toilet paper, And so when you really think about what that was, you start thinking to yourself, like, wait, so this is why you're yelling at somebody? And basically they would say things, and to be forward, they would say things like, I hope you get COVID and die. And they would hang up the phone, or they would just throw things off the shelf and just storm off the grocery store. I couldn't believe that our neighborhood or humanity has come down to that. And I realized very quickly that there was, these workers that we somehow, officially deemed essential, even though they've been essential for 300 years of our country. All of a sudden we're at the receiving end of something they never asked for. And, they were called on to do something bigger than themselves. And therefore they go there, they put in their lives on the line. While we went to the grocery store and got our stuff and went home, they stay at the grocery store and saw another 300, 400 people in and out of the cash register and touching the same things or whatever. And the level of stress they went through was traumatic. And I felt like that was the story that, that we needed, right? That was the story that we had to hear, because I felt like we didn't have a level of appreciation, and most importantly, the understanding of the toll that it took on some of our essential workers. And like that story, every essential career that was part of what kept us sane and safe at home has a very similar story. And I thought to myself, we kind of need to understand what it takes to be an essential worker. Furthermore, what, the ripples of what is done to them. And now, as we are exiting some type of pandemic, like, what are we going to do to pay it forward? And that's how this podcast was born.
Yeah, we're so excited for this. I've been able to listen a little bit into the roundtable discussions you all have had, and it's so moving, and it's so important, and it's so powerful, and it's conversations that we need to be having. I wanted to talk a little bit about representation of Latinos in media. So not just podcasting specifically, but as you know, TV and film, we're underrepresented basically in all forms of media. I wanted to ask you why do you think that is, and how can we all sort of do our parts to quote unquote fix that lack of representation?
Well, I think that we inherited we inherited a lot of the perception of what audiences wanted to watch or not wanted to watch for, I would say 100 years of content, or more. We were given basically what they were willing to produce. And unfortunately, traditionally, these entertainment jobs, were not jobs that seem to have been, options for some of our communities. And therefore, the narrative was controlled for many years based on who was making it, who was making the content. From television to film to, radio shows back in the day, and now coming full circle to everything from streaming. But as the world gets more transparent, and as the world gets smaller, we realize that we don't look like what most of these iconic stories that make it to screen and television are like. So I really think that one of the biggest reasons is because, unfortunately, this content was made with the narrative or the point of view of the people that were making, and I think that as we inherit more leadership roles, I think that the paradigm is shifting. And as we have more strategic partnerships like the one I have with iHeartRadio, we continue to create more content streams, that can find themselves to the audiences that, hadn't seen themselves or heard themselves or been, respected, on the screen or off, so I think that that's a lot of it. But when you ask me like, why is that, it's hard to be optimistic or even be disarming about the why. It's a very sobering moment to have that conversation. And unfortunately, most masses and most audiences don't want to hear that conversation of suppression and oppression. They want to hear the fact that like, it's getting better. And the truth is like, it is really getting better, but there is a very, very specific reason and why it's been suppressed and delayed. But I think the more that, the industries and the more that whether it's Hollywood or whether it's iHeartRadio and anybody creates a platform where we can perform and execute at the level of anyone else, and if given an opportunity to not just tell our stories, but invite everyone else to our stories. Because here's the other perception is like, don't give us an opportunity to tell our stories and pretend like these are stories just for them. Oh, we're making stories for them, we're, and like, oh, well, that's a channel for them, and that's really not going to really move the needle forward. The what's going to move the needle forward is our ability to invite most cultures and most communities to enjoy and understand who we are, so they can understand what we do have in common. So therefore, we can really create unity among our communities, and we can find a cultural standpoint in which change the values of how we see ourselves in this country. We're not a guest, we're citizens. We wear the uniform, we're doctors, we're attorneys. We get, we have the essential jobs. And during the pandemic, a lot of our minority communities were responsible for the mass level of relief, from the farmer workers to the social workers who are helping the families who unfortunately are stressed and they need psychological help, from the paramedics to the doctors to, there's an ecosystem of amazing individuals that are immigrants, but this is when we come full circle of the why, to dwell on the why right now it could get us a little more bitter, but I think to dwell on the how we move forward, I think is what is going to lead us to finding the what is going to make it happen. And I think that's what this conversation is about, right? It's about, here's a how, and here's the what it is. And we hope that you understand that there's a new why this is important.
Yeah, it's interesting that the how for us was to build this project with Giselle on our side leading it, called My Cultura, which, like we said, is this. It's a dedicated new company that we've launched with Enrique Santos that is by Latinx creators. But it's interesting when you say, well, who is it for? It's not necessarily for Latinx listeners. Yes, in part, but it's for everybody. And I think what's been a learning curve for a lot of us insofar as the Latino demographic in the United States is so large, almost 20% of the country, and quickly 25%, that it's not an us, them, an insider, outsider. If you're not speaking to this audience, you're not speaking. It's that large, and it's interesting. You talk about some of the biggest influencers and creators in the country, in the world, are this demographic. So it's been interesting to build this and pitch it to brands, to new creators jumping in, from yourself to Lin-Manuel Miranda to Malala Negra, like just an incredible group of people jumping in and wanting to join this. But it begs the question for me, when you were coming up in your career, did you think of yourself as, I'm a Latino actor or producer? Or did you think, I want to stop saying that as fast as I can and just be an actor and a producer? Like, where did you sit with that?
I appreciate that. And to your point, I feel like My Cultura should be a destination for content creators who want a platform to have their voices heard everywhere else. The thing about what I like about My Cultura is that please don't confuse it with another Latino channel. You know, that's something that we have to really drive. And as a company and in a partnership that I have with iHeartRadio, is that we need to communicate and make sure that our audiences and our communities don't feel like this is another channel for Latinos. This is a channel for Latinos to invite everyone to discover who we are, right? Because if without a platform and our ability to make our own content, it's hard for us to, you know, have a verbal invitation. Here's who we are. Here's why we relate. Here's where we do have, you know, a life in common. So, you know, and coming full circle to your point, you know, to your question, I think it was the other way around. You know, I never saw myself. Obviously, I looked at myself in a mirror and I was like, oh, I'm a Latino. I'm brown and beautiful. You know what I mean? But when I thought about myself as an artist, like my biggest influences was Anthony Quinn, right? Anthony Quinn played every ethnicity in the book, and he was a Latino, right? I looked at like the achievements of, you know, of Bessie Arnaz, and you know how iconic all of his universal success was, that it provided to all communities, you know, and he was a pioneer of that. And even though he had an accent, he was a Cuban man, you know, he was an artist, you know, and you know, that's kind of how I saw myself. That was the way I saw myself. I saw myself as an artist, and I just wanted to be the funniest I could be. I wanted to be the best I could be when I was on screen and anything I did. And that's what I decided to do. And then I think in retrospect, the achievements of me as an artist, you know, brought a lot of pride to my heritage. And then, you know, opened some doors as well as some of my other colleagues who started, you know, 25 years, 26 years ago, like I did. And now you come full circle to who we are now. There's a level of pride of how far we've come, you know, and I want everyone to feel very positive about seeing themselves as Latino and identifying themselves with the Latinx community. I also want them to see themselves as individuals who Latino is a gift, you know, and a character, you know, and a part of their DNA, but their achievements as human beings are even more important to the community and to the culture. So I want that to be also the voice of My Cultura and our podcast, for them to see that we do have a contribution in history, and that, you know, short, you know, some of our contribution is being as colorful as a Latino, you know, but the other contribution is our achievements as people. And I think that is going to change the world for our Latino community. So I never saw myself as a Latino actor. I saw myself as an actor. And, you know, the more, you know, 2 decades and a half in, I'm still here. And now there's so many newfound Latinos in the industry, which is, I mean, I love it. You know, we could have used you before. You know, you could have really made that a little bit more noise before, when we were out there just, you know, sticking to our accents. And saying no to the stereotypical roles that we could have used to before. But nonetheless, it multiplied our numbers, and we're excited that you want to be part of exactly who you've always been. And this is a call to a lot of my industry, because this is a time where, you don't have to be politically correct. You can finally be who you are, and before we were told that, you needed to be Americanized. So then all the colorful communities can like you, or they can watch your stuff, so you can be disarming enough for them, so you're not threatening. You were told that 30 years ago, but you come full circle, and what's special about you is exactly who you are. And I think that that's the biggest message. That's the reason for my cultura. That is the reason for my podcast, Essential Voices, is to continue to humanize who we are as a community.
I mean, what's special about you is exactly who you are. I think, Giselle, we'll take that as our tagline for the whole network, because that's awesome.
I'm wiping tears. I think that hit me. That hit me in a very nice way. Thank you so much for that.
Incredible. You're a pioneer, a trailblazer. I'm just so grateful, Wilmer, that My Cultura and Essential Voices, your new podcast, is a part of your next chapter, and I'm really grateful you're partnering with us on it. Some shows are really great, some shows are really great and important, and this is both of those things. So thank you for hanging out with us today. Thank you for being a partner. Really, really appreciate it, man.
It's a privilege, and it's an honor to be here for when in 10 years from now, we'll look back and say, thank God we started the snowball, because I promise you that through these voices, the world would be more colorful and happier, and I just want to remind to all my fans who've always been supportive and who are now going to tune into this thing, this is for you, because this is who you are. And these essential voices, you're going to not only see yourselves in them, but you're going to be inspired to be them. And there's a million careers that you're going to hear that you had no idea were part of the essential biology of our existence. And I welcome you to listen to Essential Voices and on iHeartRadio and everywhere you get your podcast. But it's important that we tell the world that we have arrived, and it's okay to make a little noise.
And everybody, thanks for listening today. As always, we really appreciate it. Hopefully it was fun and you learned a thing or two along the way. We will see you next week for more. Wilmer, take care of yourself.
Pleasure, guys.
Podversations is a production of iHeartRadio. You can find more from the biggest names in podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.